Today's guest is the spa doctor. Dr. Trevor Cates is a licensed naturopathic practitioner who specializes in hormone balance and a holistic approach to skincare. She was the first ever licensed female naturopathic doctor in the state of California, and she received her medical degree from the National College of Natural Medicine. After years of struggling with skin problems herself and imbalanced hormones in her teen years, Dr. Cates decided to pursue a career in natural medicine to educate the masses on the intersection between hormones and healthy skin. This led her to Utah, where she worked in the spas of renowned hotels like the Waldorf Astoria and the St. Regis. It was there where she built a practice teaching clients and patients how to have clean skin from within. And then she wrote her book, Clean Skin from Within, which went on to become a USA Today national bestseller. Today, we're welcoming Dr. Cates on the show to talk about how food can impact skin and the details around certain nutrients to add to your skincare line and ones to avoid. Let's welcome Dr. Cates to the show. All right, Dr. Cates, I've been looking forward to this interview for so long. Skin health and hormone health go hand in hand, and you have done a phenomenal job detailing that in your book, and you have years of experience in this space. You were the third naturopathic doctor ever licensed in the state of California, the first female. You've been on a mission for a long time, and I'm so excited to have you on the podcast to talk all about it.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Well, can we start from the beginning? When did you know that you wanted to be a naturopathic doctor, and what got you interested in skin health?
Yeah, well, it actually was my own personal struggles with skin and my health as a child. I had a lot of allergies, and they showed up in my health on on my skin. So hives, eczema, mysterious rashes. I was sensitive to every skincare product and soap, and it was very frustrating, I'm sure, for my parents. But so my parents took me to see every different kind of specialist, and I was given a lot of different medications that I would either have an allergic reaction or an adverse reaction to. So I would just continue to feel worse. So my symptoms were physically debilitating, itching, keeping me up at night, uncomfortable. I was sick a lot. And then also I just didn't feel like a normal kid. And when anyone who has skin issues, especially and they show up on your face, it is really embarrassing. And as a kid, I remember being so embarrassed by my skin, and I wanted to try and hide. And it was so I get it. If anybody is struggling with skin issues, I understand how challenging it can be. Thankfully, my parents didn't give up searching, and they eventually found a holistic practitioner that they took me to. And it was the one thing that turned my health around. And I remember being 11 years old and thinking, why didn't any of the doctors mention this approach anywhere along my journey? Why did I have to go through all of this to find this? And so it planted a seed really early on in my life. And then eventually, when I was in college, I learned about naturopathic medicine and the naturopathic medical schools. And I realized, even though I was on the pre-law society, on the track to become a lawyer, I was like, I'm changing everything. This is my path. So I had to go back. I about to graduate, went back and did all my pre-med and went to naturopathic medical school. And I graduated 22 years ago. And it's been an amazing journey. It's been absolutely fantastic. When I moved to California, it was an exciting time. Like you mentioned, I was the first woman licensed there. And then now I live in Utah. I've been here for a while, and it's been a really rewarding journey. And it's interesting, though, what took me back to focusing on skin was actually when I moved to Utah, and I set up my practice at the Waldorf Astoria spa here in Park City. And that's where I became known as the spa doctor. And I was helping lead women through, and men, but mostly women, through a 2-week weight loss program. And at the end of the 2 weeks, the people that were doing the program would say, Dr. Cates, I've lost this weight. I feel good. But what surprises me is my skin. I didn't know that it could look this good. And so their skin issues were clearing up, or they were noticing that their skin had this healthier, more vibrancy to it. they looked younger, more vibrant, right? And so they were like, I'm just surprised. And that's when I realized this message of your skin being an outer reflection of your overall health is not something that most people were taught. So that's what led me to write my first book, Clean Skin from Within. And then since that first book, another big question that came up for people was around hormones. Like the biggest thing for women is like, what is going on with my hormones? Especially as we get older, it gets more complex. And so that's what led me to write my most recent book, Natural Beauty Reset.
I love it. Well, let's go back to your imbalance and what was going on with you. You obviously had gone to a number of doctors for skin issues. What were some of the Western approaches to treating your skin issues? And when you finally met with the holistic doctor, what was different?
Yeah. So for my allergy symptoms, so I had skin issues as well as, the typical sneezing, coughing, runny nose, itchy eyes, all of that. So I was put on a lot of antihistamines. And so they put me on the whole range of them. So with antihistamines, they typically either you take the ones that make you really tired or you take the ones that make you feel amped up. So they would give me the ones during the day that make you feel amped up and the ones the night like the Benadryl to that I go fall asleep. But I always felt like I was walking around in a cloud, like just this constant haze. I never really felt like I was fully awake or like conscious. It's an interesting thing with antihistamines is because of the side effects, the side effects are actually quite debilitating with
Oh,
those.
yeah.
And I remember that really well. I remember at one point walking through school, feeling like I was walking not on the ground.
Yeah. I actually have had that same experience. I was diagnosed with celiac disease, silent celiac, because I didn't have kind of the debilitating GI effects of it, but was put on antihistamines. My whole childhood had sinus infection after sinus infection, antibiotic after antibiotic, and allergies to every antibiotic I was given as a child, full body hives that resulted in having to take Zyrtec or Claritin and that I can totally attest to that. It feels like you're high. It feels so uncomfortable, out of body. And it's true. You're either buzzing or you're sleeping. And it's hard. Like my son actually has a major dairy allergy, and we were able to identify a dairy allergy, a dog allergy, and an egg allergy that we've since kind of grown out of and we're working to grow out of through, immune system training with tolerance. But, the recommendation at 2 years old was a daily Claritin or Zyrtec, and just to give him the dose before we see his lips swell and hives on his face. And I was just kind of like, yeah, I think I'll probably just avoid it until we work our way through it. And we'll use an antihistamine if he gets accidentally, quote unquote, dairied at school or at a birthday party. And he kind of ends up looking like Will Smith and Hitch. Then I'll go that way. But I think when you have a history with antihistamines, it's really hard to look at that as an answer for allergies because of kind of the disassociation you have in your own life when you're on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that side effects of medications are just so common that people don't even realize that they're having them. The doctors oftentimes don't talk about the side effects they consider them so mild that they just don't really mention them. And so I see people when they go off the medications are like, I didn't even know I could feel this good. And I'm not saying that everybody should just stop their medications. Obviously, conventional medicine, it certainly has its place. Like when we need antibiotics, or if we have such of a flare up of things like eczema, steroids can kind of calm it down for a time being, but they're not meant to be taken long term. We need to get to the root cause. And so sometimes these medications can be used temporarily, but then we have to really get to the root cause. And antibiotics, as you mentioned, that was another thing. I was put on a lot of antibiotics because I also would end up getting strep throat. And so they would put me on those. I developed an allergy to sulfa drugs. And then they would put me on other antibiotics. And then I would have those side effects. And of course, we know this also wreck your gut. And so disrupting the gut microbiome, and that is one of the big root causes behind skin issues, hormonal imbalances, and so many, and mental health too. So, I mean, the list goes on and on about with the connection between our gut and our health, but those are the things that we're talking about today. So, yes, unfortunately, that is the typical approach.
Right. And so when you first met with the holistic doctor when you were 11 years old, what did they do differently?
Well, the first thing that I noticed in the appointment is she spent over an hour talking to me. And I was like, no doctor has ever spent more than like 10 minutes talking to me. So that was one thing that was different. She was also a woman, so like most of the people I saw were men, and
Yeah.
which I know that there are a lot more female doctors now, but at that time they're just it was mostly a male focused kind of profession. And so those were some of the things I noticed right away. And I was like really curious, like, why is she asking me all these things? And then she recommended some things like some homeopathic remedies and then also some things, lifestyle things. And so when I started making those changes and taking, this natural approach, I started noticing difference right away. And then over time, these symptoms started clearing up. I also didn't need to be on the medications anymore, which then I didn't have to worry about the side effects of the medications. And again, it was one of those things where I'm like, why didn't the other doctors tell us about this? And my father was also dealing with health issues at the time, and his health issues were reversed as well. And so both of us developed this passion for natural medicine and so it set me on this path.
Wow. And so fast forward, you're in the Waldorf Astoria, you're working in their Utah location, you're known as the spa doctor, you're putting people on these weight loss programs, and then the end result is vibrant, glowing, youthful skin. Can you talk a little bit about the resets and the programs you were putting people on and what the focus was? Like, what are your pillars of health when it comes to really allowing that clear skin from within and that glow to shine through?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really truly believe that our bodies are incredibly well designed and that when we give it the right tools, it can restore harmony. And part of that has to do with addressing the root causes. As I mentioned, if we don't address the root causes and we just keep throwing medications or ignoring those signs, then we can go from having like maybe some mild skin issues to having a lot more complicated health issues. And so while people might just use some topical steroids or they might go on allergy medications or those sorts of things to deal with, or, Accutane or whatever it is to deal with certain different skin issues, if you're not getting to that root cause, it's that root cause is going to continue to come up in your health in other ways. So I've seen people that had eczema as a child and they were put on topical steroids. And then as they got older, then they developed asthma and then they were put on inhalers. And then later on, then they develop autoimmune disease. Because if you're not getting to that underlying cause, the inflammation, the immune system imbalances, those sorts of things, then it's just going to keep showing up throughout your lifetime. And it also shows you what your tendencies are, right? So we can have these genetic predispositions. So like allergies run in my family. It's part of a genetic predisposition. But that doesn't mean that I have to suffer with allergies the rest of my life or that my kids have to suffer with allergies, right? That we can address these genetic predispositions. So with my first book, I talk about 6 root causes behind skin issues. And so those are things like inflammation, microbiome imbalances, going back to the gut, nutritional deficiencies, hormonal imbalances, and oxidative damage, blood sugar imbalances. These are some of the things that if we don't address these, we can't clear up skin issues, and they are related to so many other health conditions.
Yeah, definitely. I love all your root causes because they really work together. When you start to balance your blood sugar and eat whole foods and clean proteins, then you kind of, you're getting rid of nutrient deficiencies, you're focusing on the gut microbiome. Like you can really attack a lot of it with diet and lifestyle. And then the ultimate is that balance of hormones that comes when you're well nourished and balanced. So can we talk a little bit about that, the program that you put people on and what you like to see to address these root causes?
Yeah. So my new book, Natural Beauty Reset, is a 7-day plan, and I do a 7-day plan for each season.
Okay.
And so depending upon when people start the program, they do the program for that season. And there's recommendations for food, movement, mindset, and skincare for each season because our needs change with each season. And this was something that I didn't talk about in my first book, but I wanted to make sure that I got, that's why I did my second book to really help people understand that our seasonal changes, that things that are like change with our lives, with the food around us, and why we have to shift and how we shift.
Oh, I would love for you to go into the details of that because that's, I can get into personally. I have a pretty simple skincare routine, but as I'm aging, I'm going to be 40 in July, I'm pregnant with my third baby. We're dealing with crazy weather here in California. It's been raining nonstop. We've got a lot of snow dump, which is fun for skiing and snowboarding, but it's cold, it's wet, and then it's dry and kind of dealing with winter. So can you walk us through what each season sort of looks like and the things that you look for? Because I know, whether it's someone using a retinol alternative or if they're using a lactic acid, or are we supposed to be exfoliating? Are we supposed to be hydrating? Are we supposed to be using vitamin C? Like there are so many tricks of the trade when you're the spa doctor. So this is not my expertise. But maybe you can talk us through the differences as you go through seasons and what you look for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things that changes with the seasons, why we have seasons, is the sun.
Yeah.
And so, even wherever you live in the world, of course, it changes, of course, over like your distance to the equator and all of those sorts of things, and whether you're in the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere. But overall, the distance of where the sun is in relationship to us changes. So that impacts the food where we live. It impacts, that impacts our nutritional status because when we eat food in season, it is more nutritionally dense. It also tastes better.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one thing is the food and the nutrition that our bodies are able to get. But also our relationship to the sun as humans. So when with the length of the day, the amount of sunlight hours, it impacts our sleep, which sleep is such a huge component of our overall health. If we are not sleeping, our bodies cannot function as they are designed. So if we're not getting high quality and the quality and quantity of sleep that we need, and and I don't mean just like taking sleep meds and making yourself sleep, but actually getting the different phases of sleep that we need in order to for our bodies to function. So it impacts our sleep and it also impacts our hormones. So I think a lot of people don't even realize how much sunlight plays a role in our mood and our sleep and our hormones and our skin. So the other thing is the sun exposure on our skin. And that means we can be more, especially if we're more fair, we're more sensitive to sun damage, and also our vitamin D levels. All of these things are so crucial to our health, and they change with the seasons. So, for example, we're in the winter season at the time of this recording, and so we have shorter days, less sunlight, and we're spending more time indoors typically. So with that comes with when we think about like our health overall, this can be the most challenging time for our mood and for incorporating healthy habits. So because we can get stuck in a rut, especially after we're coming from the holidays. The holidays can be a time when we're eating more sugar than we typically do. We're more stressed because of family stuff. A lot of things can be happening. So we might slip into eating comfort foods that aren't particularly supportive for our bodies. And so that's one thing that we really want to focus on is how can we support our bodies to help support our emotional status. So all of these things are particularly important. And then they're also our skincare practices need to change because what can we do? Like you were talking about, the cold, the snow, the wind, all of the things we can get, we can be out in the sun. I live in Park City where suns actually can be pretty intense here, even in the wintertime. So how do we get that right balance for our skin? So a lot of times we need more exfoliation. We need more plant-based oils to really hydrate our skin. So I know I just shared a lot there. So tell me which of those things you want to dive into more.
Yeah, let's dive into sun damage and vitamin D, because I think there is a lot of information out there in regards to sunscreens and specific chemical sunscreens, physical blockers. If wearing sunscreen all the time prevents, the natural production of vitamin D endogenously. I'd love your take on sun exposure. I love sun exposure. I'm a lizard, like California, born and raised beach girl. I would spend all day laying out at the beach without a swipe of sunscreen and call it a day. I have olive complexion. I get like, what do they call them? All sunspots, olive spots, like my grandma used to, and I'm not her age. So I'm just curious what your take is, because you're a naturopathic doctor, on protecting our skin from sun damage, but also maximizing our vitamin D production.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. It's a really great question. And it is an important one because yes, when we use sunscreen, it can protect our skin from sun damage, which means the sun damage causes premature aging. It also makes us susceptible to certain types of skin cancers and then, but at the same time, when we use sunscreen, we block that ability for our bodies to make vitamin D from sun exposure. So what is the right balance there? Because we do need both. Well, I do think it's important for us to get some sun exposure. I don't think we should be afraid of the sun. There's a lot of benefits from the sun, not just vitamin D, but also endorphins from being outdoors in nature. It helps being out in nature helps our gut microbiome too, our microbiome of our skin. And so we need to be outdoors. And there's so many benefits of being out in nature and in sunshine. So really, but for vitamin D specifically, we really only need to go out in the sun a few times a week with sunlight on unexposed skin to get vitamin D, our vitamin D stores. Now that really changes from person to person because the varying factors of that are where in the world do you live? Like how close to the sun are you? Like in Park City, we're really close to the sun. So we don't need as much sun exposure to get vitamin D. However, it also depends on your skin type. So the more pigmentation you have, the more sun exposure you would need to get for vitamin D. For someone that's more fair like me, I don't need as much sun exposure. So again, it's at varying amounts. And I do feel that because we get the most sun exposure on our face, neck, and the tops of our hands, that those are the areas you want to focus on covering up. So hats, in the wintertime, I think it's great to wear gloves when you're driving, especially because it's cold anyway. But you also remember that even sunlight through windows is giving you UV exposure. So that's UVA. You still get the UVA, which is think of A standing for aging. Like that's the one that's the more dangerous as far as accelerating our aging. So even through the windows, and you're driving your car, you get it face, neck, tops of your hands, you're driving a lot in the car. So those are the areas I think where, wear a sunscreen, wear hats, wear gloves if if it makes sense. I'm not going to say we go back to the white gloves.
Yeah.
But I think that could be kind of fun.
I should have done that a long time ago. Gloves.
Right?
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I literally just made every window on the back of my house larger than it was when I purchased my home. I mean, I'm in a fishbowl from the back of our house, and it faces sunset in California. It faces the water, and we get a lot of sun exposure into our kitchen, into our bedrooms. So I'm gonna be UV aging big time here.
No, I don't think we should be super concerned about that, because I do think that, again, I don't want people to be afraid of the sun, because we do get a lot of benefits from sun exposure. But I do think that when we're looking at protecting our skin, what I'm saying is that make sure that you're covering the parts that you get the most. But I do want to talk about sunscreen, because there are different types of sunscreens. Some are better than others. And there's been some media attention on with this, which is really great. And of course, like Hawaii and certain places have banned certain types of sunscreen because of the damage to the environment. But also it's they can be harmful to our health as well. So what we want to be careful of is some of the chemical sunscreen ingredients like oxybenzone. So some of these chemical sunscreen ingredients have endocrine disrupting effects, so hormone disrupting effects. There's a whole class of chemical called endocrine disrupting chemicals. And these are the ones we really want to be careful with, especially when we're talking about hormonal imbalances. And as we get older, these are the ones that we are exposed to, so many of them. So any way that we can reduce our exposure to these is going to be better. So instead of some of these chemical sunscreens, I recommend people use zinc oxide based sunscreens. And you might even find you find a tinted version that, if people typically wear a foundation or something, they could just use that instead. I mean, I don't think that we necessarily need to be covered up all day long every day either. I think that to give your skin a break, that's why I don't put sunscreen in the Spa Doctor skincare products, because I feel like at night I want people to not have to use sunscreen, or when they don't need it, to just go sunscreen free.
Great answer. And now, are there differences between nano zinc products and regular zinc products? I think a lot of people are turned off by the white pasty look. I love a BB cream with zinc. I mean, that is total minimalist. So, just a tinted kind of moisturizer with a little bit of zinc goes a long way for me. And it's the way I get consistent with wearing sunscreen. But is there a difference? Is there something we should be looking out for?
Yeah, you want to be careful with the nano sized. And now we're getting into the more of the details, which I love. So nano sized particles, there's a concern that first of all, the biggest risk with nano sized particles in the sunscreens is when you use them in aerosolized products. So any kind of powders or sprays, you definitely want to avoid these, because they are so small that they can get through the alveoli and the lungs and actually get into circulation and maybe create some issues with the lungs. So we definitely want to avoid those. And then also there's some concern that with any skincare product, that you can absorb some of that, because they're so small, they actually can get into the bloodstream when you use them topically. So yes, I mean, I think using some that are, there are different types now of sunscreens where you don't have to have that super pasty look, but at the same time, you don't want the nano size. So
love it.
It's that right, finding that right balance. And hopefully the technology and the testing on this will get better and better. And I have hope that it will.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it's moving that direction, especially, unfortunately, it does take negative press and studies to show endocrine disruption, where people start to really look for other options. But I just wanted to ask that question, because I know that there are certain natural beauty companies coming out with nano size, and that's what I had read. And, you want the promises of zinc, but you also don't want any issues. Like, the whole point is to not have issues. So I'd love to dive deeper into the plant oils and hydrating the skin, the lipid layer, protecting the skin microbiome. There's been some interesting studies that I've read that have come out around specific floral oils or essential oils oxidizing. And there's a lot of products that use a lot of strong floral oils. And then looking at certain seed oils being really prevalent in skincare products, and seed oils being linked to inflammation and oxidation. How is that different internalized versus topically on the skin when it comes to omegas? Can you talk us through all that?
Yeah, great questions. So I find plant-based oils to be absolutely fantastic. I mean, first of all, a lot of skincare products are, mineral oil based, which is a petroleum byproduct. And petroleum just a reminder, everybody, because sometimes we forget and we just look over ingredients and not really pay attention to where they come from. Petroleum is what we use to make gasoline, and petroleum is also used to make mineral oil. So there are some things that can go wrong, and some contaminants can show up in mineral oil. Also, it's just not nourishing to the skin. And so, what's the point of using mineral oil? Get rid of the mineral oil, any kind of petrolatum, anything that has that on the label, and instead look for products that have these plant-based oils, because they do actually provide a lot more nourishment for the skin without the concerns of these contaminants that could be potentially in petroleum-based products. So the nourishment of plant-based oils is, a lot of it has to do with the antioxidant richness of the potentially, if they're made properly. So this is when we start to get into the details of it. And this is why being a little bit of, I don't want to admit it, but a little bit of a control freak is what caused me to create my own skincare line, because I kept finding that I would tell my patients, choose a natural skincare line. And then they would come back and be like, I'm having allergic reactions to it. I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the way it makes my skin look. I miss, more active products. And so that's what led me to create the Spa Doctor skincare line, and to really dive into looking at the skin microbiome and what actually helps support the skin microbiome, because that in turn is what's going to help create healthy skin. So we can talk about ingredients all day long. We can talk about all of these things, but we have to create an environment on the skin that actually creates healthy skin. So I want to talk a bit about that, about the skin microbiome, because I think there's a lot of talk about the gut microbiome, but not as much about the skin microbiome. And when we have a healthy gut microbiome, that absolutely helps with the skin microbiome. So that's something I talk about in both of my books. And I don't want to not mention that, because that is a really, really important part. But there's also what we put on our skin that impacts the skin microbiome. So when we look at products we put on our skin, does it contain endocrine disrupting chemicals? We don't want that, right? Does it contain nutrients for our skin? And does it help support the skin microbiome? So our skin is actually mildly acidic. And if you think about it, our skin, one of the biggest functions of our skin as our largest organ is to protect our bodies from the outside world. So it has this natural acidity to it to help have that function. It has a barrier function with the oils of the skin, and it has microorganisms on it that live on and protect the skin. So when we do our skincare routine, we're either supporting it or we're actually breaking it down. So it's not just endocrine disrupting chemicals that I've been trying to help educate people about, but what are the other things that are actually disrupting your skin microbiome or not nourishing your skin? So going back to plant-based oils, one of the great things about some of those oils, if they're made properly and they're not just like, we want extra virgin, cold pressed olive oil to use in our salad dressings, we want those kinds of oils to use in our skin. So when oils go wrong is either when they're, synthetic like mineral, or when they're overly processed or when they're oxidized. So we want our oils like we would want to eat them, right? We want them fresh, we want them stable, and we want them clean. And if we are choosing oils that way, they're beneficial, right? And so the problems that go with, like that you mentioned, that might go wrong with oils is when they're not made right.
So how do you determine that your skincare line and the oils used in it are cold pressed, protected against heat, light, and oxidation? And is there a timeline in which you should be keeping these oils? Because I will say oils last a lot longer for me than any of my lotion products. I mean, I just feel like a little goes such a long way in hydrating the skin or adding a few drops here and there, that sometimes, I'll have those little jars with the droppers for months at a time. Is there a timeline? Should we be throwing an expiration date with a permanent marker on the bottom? Like, what should we be doing?
Yeah, skincare products do have expiration dates. And I think people forget that because I know I have so many people that have had products in their cabinets for years, maybe like decades, but they're still
Whoa. Yeah.
here. Please know the skincare products do have expiration dates. And it depends on the oil. So some oils last longer than others. And also it depends on how they're stored and also what else is in the oil with them. If it's 100% oil, that's different than if it has any kind of water-based ingredient in it. Then we're talking about, that can easily go off more than something that's 100% oil. And so we want, and that's partly why, like the Spa Doctor products, we have opaque containers. Like some people will say, why don't you have clear,
Pretty glass containers.
yeah, so that I can see how much is that. Well, we got to have opaque because that way it protects the light from oxidizing it faster. We also want to store oils just like with our food oils, store them in, a cabinet that's not sitting out in the sun, right? So those kinds of things will help your oils last longer. Also, understanding what rancid oils smell like is a really good idea. So when oils go rancid, when they go bad, when they're expiring, they smell pungent. They smell rancid. So if you're starting to use your skincare products and they don't smell the same, if the scent has changed, then you probably want to go ahead and toss them out or contact the manufacturer and ask them what the expiration date is if it's not on the packaging.
That's a great call.
Yeah. So with the Spa Doctor products, our products have a 2-year shelf life. We do stability testing on them to determine that. And then even if we have a batch that we're continuing to sell after a year or so, we will continue to test. I can't say that. I can tell you that the Spa Doctor, what we do as a company and our testing, our stability testing, as well as for contamination and the pH and all of that is way above and beyond what the FDA requires and what most companies will do. My manufacturer, I use a company that she makes other products too. And she says to me regularly, other companies don't ask me for these tests and to ask me these questions of the products. And I want people to know that sometimes you have to ask questions of a manufacturer if you have a company that you're using regularly. And I think it's good for companies to get asked questions because then that's going to help because the FDA doesn't regulate these products very well, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I will say there is something, I have a love for a practitioner manufacturer because you're looking at years of experience and understanding how things work with people's skin or their gut or their health. And you have needs and you have expectations and really high standards for the product. You came out with it not because you needed to, but because you wanted to fill a void that you saw that was in your industry. And that's, I've gone through that personally and I know what that feels like. You're like, why did I decide to do this? But also very excited about the opportunity to be able to provide that kind of a product. My last question is those oils, when you think about them in the jar, protecting them from, with an opaque container and making sure that they are nourishing to the skin. Well, what happens when we put them on our face and we walk outside in the sun and the heat and the air?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think the biggest one having to do with photosensitivity has more to do with some of the essential oils that come from the citrus family. Those are some of the ones that we have to watch out for. There definitely are certain ingredients that are called photosensitizing, so they can make you more prone to sun damage. So hopefully companies like the Spa Doctor, we make sure that our ingredients are not photosensitizing.
Yeah.
And so that's because we want people to be able to use them in the morning all day long. Now, there are some skincare products where it says use at night. If your products say use at night, there's a reason for that. So don't use them in the morning and then go out in the sun, because if they contain things like retinol or certain other even natural ingredients with like citrus and things, there's a reason why you don't want to go out in the sun when you have them on. So again, So there actually can be ways to manufacture essential oils so that they don't have the photosensitizing effects.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we do with our ingredients, because we do have some citrus essential oils that we use, but they don't have the photosensitizing effects. So it really depends on the manufacturer. But one way to know is hopefully they will put on the label, use at night.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of photosensitizing things like retinol, and maybe certain exfoliants and things of that nature, what is the deal with exfoliating? Like, I love to exfoliate. I love the way my skincare sits on my skin. I love, like the way that my skin looks in the mirror after I've exfoliated, after the redness goes away, things like that. But how often should we be exfoliating? And speaking of the skin microbiome, isn't that just disrupting our skin microbiome?
Yeah. Kelly, you'd ask such great questions. Thank you.
Well, I'm really curious. I mean, I feel like I've been on the natural skincare kick for such a long time, like supporting brands like Credo and the detox market, and like trying to find brands that work for me, and really trying to understand it from a scientific level. But also it's like I went from using really active Kate Somerville ingredients in my early 20s to making this big shift. And I just, want to just look my age. I don't need to look younger or older. I just want to look my age. And I want to protect all my microbiomes.
Right. Absolutely. And this is really an important shift is happening in skincare right now, where a lot of companies are making natural skincare. So when I started doing this, and I've been a naturopathic doctor for 22 years. And when I first started doing more of this, like there just weren't many options for natural skincare. But now all the big companies are making natural skincare products. But natural, actually, the word natural doesn't actually have any FDA regulation. There are no regulations around that word. So anyone can claim this. So that actually means nothing. So what I want to do is redefine what this means. So to me, what it means is not only clean, pure, actually free of these endocrine disrupting, carcinogenic, and other harmful ingredients, but also that support the skin microbiome. And that's what a lot of natural skincare companies or companies that make natural products haven't yet done. And that's what I'm encouraging my colleagues, other people that make skincare, is to start looking at, because we have to support the natural pH of the skin. Most skincare products have a pH that's too high and actually damages the skin microbiome. So we make sure that all of our skincare products are in the 4.6 to 5 pH range, which the research shows supports the natural skin microbiome and helps with keeping the skin healthy, keeping it from breaking out, keeping it from aging prematurely. So that's one of the fundamental things that's missing from a lot of skincare lines.
If we called any skincare line, would they know their pH of their products?
Hopefully they do. They should, because it's part of basic chemistry.
Yeah.
That's
right. If they're testing anything, they should know their pH. Yeah.
And so we put it on the website what our pH is, but I don't think that most companies do. But you can just simply get pH strips. Just get
perfect.
Order them. The only thing with oils, if it's 100% oil, you can't test the pH of oils. But I also know you asked about exfoliation. And so I want to go back to that. And because the two biggest mistakes that people make in skincare are cleansing and exfoliation. And cleansing, because going back to the pH, most cleansers, because of the sudsing and the foaming, means they have a high pH. So you're starting off your skincare routine, stripping your skin. So we've got to get away from this idea that, all microorganisms are bad. Right? We want to get rid of the ones that we don't want, but we want to keep the healthy microbes. So when you strip your skin with these high pH products, then you have to use toners, and you have to do all this stuff to get your skin pH back. But if you use a good skin cleanser, and those are oil-based cleansers like the one that we use, then you're starting off in the right place. And then with exfoliation, it's about balance. I do think exfoliation is important, but most people over exfoliate, even with natural products. you don't use like apricot kernels or coffee grounds or brushes on your face. You can use that on your elbows, on your feet, and your, like places that need some like really good exfoliation, but don't use them on your face because you're actually damaging your skin microbiome. And you could be, you could also be altering your, or speeding up the collagen breakdown in your skin. So it's a nice balance of getting, you can use enzymatic or physical exfoliation, but very finely ground. Like we typically use like finely ground mother of pearl or things like that to use an exfoliation, or things like pineapple or bromelain. Those sorts of things can also provide the enzymatic. But again, then you have to protect your skin from the sun damage too.
Wow. Yeah. First of all, that oil cleansing bit, just knowing right away that anything sudsy is above the pH that you want it to be. I did make the change and the move over to oil-based cleansing in my pregnancies. So Sebastian's 4.5 now. And that was a major shift for me because prior to my Kate Somerville era, I was in the orange, I don't want to say clean and clear, but it was like Neutrogena's orange stripping sudsy, like during high school, sudsy cleanser, and then like a water-based cream with SPF. Like that was my high school routine. I had more acne, more what felt like combination skin. I'd go from super dry to super oily to broken out. There was very little exfoliation happening. It was just kind of a mess. And I will say I did tend to have like pretty good skin in that stage of life compared to some of my friends, but I still wasn't doing any good for myself with that routine. But the oil cleansing has been a total game changer for me, just in regards to feeling hydrated. After I use a suds cleanser now, like if I were ever to use a sudsing cleanser now, I feel like I couldn't put enough oil or night cream on my face to make it feel hydrated. It really truly has been a game changer, but it's the exfoliation that's hard for me because there are so many different types of exfoliators. Can you talk about what aren't natural or clean or supportive of the microbiome and which ones are? Because there's a lot of active ones on the market, glycolic acid and lactic acid. And are these natural? Are these the kinds of exfoliators we should be using, or should we be steering clear?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. It is somewhat personal as far as what your goals are and what your skin issues are. I think that sometimes having some of the acids like glycolic acid or salicylic acid can be helpful for people with more moderate to severe acne. But even people with mild acne or people that are, that's not really their issue. I find that if you have, if for people who use the Spa Doctor skincare system or, more pH balancing and oil-based cleansers and those sorts of things, they typically don't need those ingredients because they do come with some risk when you're using some of those acids. It does make you're causing exfoliation more rapidly than it naturally would. So if we go back to remembering our bodies are really wise and they're designed this way for a reason. I mean, I feel like humans are actually divine. Like we we have this incredible opportunity to let our bodies do what they're supposed to do. So when we try and do things that aren't natural, which is like over exfoliating or speeding up the skin cell turnover too much, we actually can create more sun damage. We can speed up the aging process. So we really do need to be careful. So I only use it. I will recommend it periodically for patients who are experiencing moderate to severe acne, but only for a period of time, because with acne, a lot of clearing up acne comes from the inside out. So addressing gut issues, looking at hormonal imbalances, nutritional deficiencies. So we really got to do that stuff. So it doesn't really, like with all the products that you can put on your skin, if you're not addressing the stuff on the inside, you're missing out. So I typically really don't even use those kinds of acids very much. I don't find that it's necessary for the majority of people.
That's so great to hear. Just in general, even simplifying the routine even more. You talked about cell turnover. I want to get back to acne after that, but you talked about cell turnover and products that increase and speed up cell turnover. Can you talk about why people are using these, what they are, and what the pros and cons are?
Yeah. So any of the acids, the more active products, retinol, things like that. The idea is that it usually takes about 30 days for our skin cells to turn over. So the thing though is that if we're not super healthy, again, this isn't ideal when our bodies are healthy. When our bodies are not, or when we're getting older, as we age, that slows down. So why people do it is, one, they're getting older and they're noticing their skin is more dull, or they're noticing, premature aging, or they're noticing, their skin is dull, it's oilier, it's more acne prone, those sorts of things. So those are typically why people will do it. But again, it's about a balance. There's a lot that we can do just to support the body in that natural ability and without having to kind of overdo it.
So if we're not overdoing it, we're using easy exfoliants like a physical exfoliant that isn't your apricot kernel, but more of like a honed mother of pearl or something that we know is very fine, or we're using an enzymatic process like a pineapple bromelain. How often should someone be using those products to exfoliate?
I think a good exfoliation would be like once or twice a week for most people. And that is, one of the more mildly exfoliating products. And even with our exfoliant, which has the finely ground mother of pearl, I don't want people to use like heavy pressure with it. Light pressure. You don't need to use a lot of pressure. Again, if you're working on your health from the inside out, that actually is going to help your skin overall. And then if you're using, I tell people to stop using brushes, like the Clarisonics and those sorts of things. They're just too much for the skin. We don't need all of that. And even with things like pineapple or papaya enzymatic kind of things, we still need to be careful with those. We don't want to leave them on a long time. Follow the instructions on products. A lot of times people will say, oh, it says to leave on for a few minutes. So I'm going to leave it on for 10 minutes or half an hour or overnight, because that means I'm going to get even more benefit. When it comes to exfoliation, more is not always better.
Got it. Great call. I feel like that's like when people try to go slightly low carb and then all of a sudden they're like fully ketogenic and they've cut out all plant foods. I'm like, I get where you're going here, but we've taken it to the nth degree and it's maybe causing more harm than good. Okay. So let's talk about acne, because you started to chat about it, and it's a topic that people really care about because it can make them feel very uncomfortable, and it can come at different times in life for different reasons. What's your approach when you have a client with acne? I know your new book talks about hormonal issues. Your first book, Clean Skin from Within. How do we clear up the skin when there's acne involved?
Yeah, a big focus for acne is the gut health. And so with our skin microbiome, there's an imbalance. When it comes to acne, that's one of the things that happens. We have this imbalance of microorganisms on the skin. And so what we want to do is we want to rebalance that. We want to remind our skin of what it's supposed to do, which is to act as, have this barrier function, but with not too much excess of, not too much oil production and not oxidizing of the oils on our skin. So when we do things from the inside out, when we get our gut microbiome in a better place, that's going to help our skin microbiome. So gut microbiome is a big part of it. Also, acne is an inflammatory skin condition. So a lot of times my patients will notice that they have acne and then they have other inflammatory issues. And again, it's like getting to that root cause is important. There are also could be nutritional needs that person. Our skin really needs certain nutrients like zinc, for example, to help with skin repair. And so we want to make sure that we're getting those. We also want to make sure that our hormones are balanced, because that's another big thing. If you think about times in our lives when we typically have acne breakouts, puberty is a big one so all these hormonal changes for both boys and girls, when they go through these hormonal changes, there can be acne issues. So getting those hormones in a more balanced place. And then again, later, like I have so many women that have come to see me and said, I'm, at these other and so many different phases of their life. A lot of times women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, where they're like, I never even had acne as a teenager. Why am I getting it now? And so again, we got to look at hormones because our hormones start changing, especially in our mid 30s and beyond. That's where perimenopause can start. And those hormonal changes can trigger some acne breakouts.
So dissecting it one by one, when you think about your top tips for supporting the gut microbiome so that it reflects in the skin microbiome, what are the key things, couple things that you tell your clients to do?
Yeah, I mean, I have a full program in my book, Clean Skin from Within. It's a 2-week program where I have 10 different items I have people eliminate, and then I give them a whole list of top foods to consume to help support the gut microbiome and to reduce inflammation, to make sure they're getting the nutrients that they need. So there's a lot in that I can't just like mention and a little soundbite here. But overall, when it comes to the gut microbiome, you want to make sure you're getting plenty of fiber, that you're getting a diverse array of produce, because when we eat a diverse array of produce, research shows that actually helps support our gut microbiome. So even people who eat a healthy diet will come into me and they have the same foods every day, all year long. And I'm like, you're missing out, because we have this seasonal array of foods that have more nutrient dense and the times that they're in season. But also when you eat a variety of food, it helps your gut microbiome. So we need to mix it up. So those are some of the big ones. And then of course, cutting out certain things like excess sugar, making sure that you're curbing those, processed foods. Those are not going to help support the gut microbiome. And then, we also want to make sure that we're addressing any dysbiosis issues that might be as a result of taking a lot of antibiotics, like you and I had as a kid. We had to take care of that, issue and address that. Those are really important too. So maybe probiotic rich foods, fermented vegetables, and things like that can be helpful for some people.
Awesome. And then when it comes to hormonal imbalances, I mean, obviously there are different times in life you touched on. If someone is 35 plus, almost 5 plus that, and moving in that direction, what's happening and why are we seeing acne at that stage?
Yeah. So what happens is we tend to have a lot. So it could be a couple of things. One is that we tend to have some androgen excess, which oftentimes is what happens at puberty as well, as they have these surges in androgens. But that can also happen as a result of these hormonal changes. It's not just like androgens are going up, but there's a relationship of the different hormones. And as they change, like as progesterone is the one that usually starts to drop first, which usually counterbalances androgens. So then that can cause your androgens to feel like they're more in excess. Mm-hmm. And then also if your estrogens are not metabolizing properly, that can be another thing that shows up too. So those are some of the things that I talk about in Natural Beauty Reset. And especially in part 1, I talk about all the hormones and details and how they relate to the skin. And so, it is definitely one that we want to pay attention to. And our hormones are so interesting and they're interconnected in these really fascinating ways. And I don't think that people realize how much lifestyle plays a role in our hormones. And lifestyle being, we've mentioned endocrine disrupting chemicals. People oftentimes don't think about the fact that we are getting exposed to these. And I think this is a big part of why we're seeing more acne than we used to, is because of these endocrine disrupting chemicals in our environment and how they're creating these issues. And then also having to do with our diet, because there are places in the world where acne doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And they have a very different lifestyle than we do.
Right. I mean, I love to look at estrogen dominance and correct that. I mean, that I think is such an interesting one, because it's really, taking care of the gut and working on the liver and having the nutrients your liver needs to detoxify that estrogen, and then having the fiber and the microbes that help push it out. Like it doesn't need to be there, and your body is meant to get rid of it. And just metabolizing those out of your system is so part of the process of keeping that balance. Oh, I'm so excited for people to dive into your new book. If you're looking for a reset, I know also your Clean Skin from Within, which was your first book, was a USA Today national bestseller, and people really lean on that as well. So where can people follow along? Where can they check out your skincare line and your books? And where can they learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So thespadoctor.com is our website, THESPADR.com. So doctor is abbreviated. You can also find the Spa Doctor on social media. We're Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and you can also check out the Woman's Doctor podcast. That's my podcast. And I'd love to have you on, Kelly.
Awesome. I'd love to be there. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cates, for being here and for sharing your expertise. Skin is such a hard topic for so many people because we're used to getting fast results. And that's one of those ones, like you said, 30 days, a couple months, and you start to see the glow happen maybe after the first couple weeks, but to really reverse some of the damage and clear up dysbiosis issues and acne, it takes dedication and time. And so you're giving people the resources to do that. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.